A lot of people have asked me what some of the best lenses are for the Sony A7 III and A7s III, so today we're going to cover what I consider to be some of the best lenses you can buy for the Sony A7 series cameras. Hey, if you don't know me, my name's Jake and I create content here to help solo creators on the go. People like me who are on the go creating small commercial projects or stuff for here on YouTube. So I test and review equipment here in Alaska, and I do tips and tutorials on how to use that equipment so you can tell better stories and make smart buying decisions when you go to buy a new piece of gear. Now, toward the end of the video, I will give you my opinion on what you should buy if you only have money for one lens or if you only want to buy two lenses. So stay tuned and see what those combinations are. Now, when it comes to lenses, it's easy for all of us to fall in the trap of thinking that we need something better, something newer, something different. But all of these lenses, I feel, are a pretty good budget option for anybody who's looking to invest in good but affordable full-frame glass, and they are all lenses that I use every single day. Toward the end of the video, I will talk about some of the lenses that I've tested and reviewed, but I don't use every day. But for these lenses here, they're lenses I use every day with client shoots, every day when I'm out exploring in Alaska, and every day that I am working on video and photography projects. To start off with, we're going to talk about the lens that I've had the longest. This is the 28-75. I bought this new when I bought my A7 III, so almost 3 years ago, and this lens was my only lens that I used on my camera for probably the first year and a half. This was the lens I took with me everywhere and did everything on, filming all my YouTube videos, most of my commercial projects with clients. Occasionally I would rent a lens that I needed for one of those, but this was the lens that was my workhorse. So I use this every single day in all kinds of conditions. One of the things that a lot of people said when this first came out, because it felt plasticky, was they were concerned about the weather sealing and concerned about how well this lens would hold up over time. I can say, after running through the woods in the winter and the summer, after climbing up mountains and doing all kinds of different commercial shoots with this, that it has held up fantastic. There is still no dust inside of the glass. It's clean, it's clear, it still produces excellent images. The autofocus on this is excellent. It works quickly, it's accurate with Sony's autofocus system. This lens has been a tremendous value. Now, if you're looking for a lens, there's a few reasons you might want to consider this to be your first lens. One, 28-75 is a really versatile focal length that gives you fairly wide stuff that you can use in larger rooms and crowded spaces with lots of people, but it also gives you the zoom range to be able to punch in and get close. I personally love to use this on interview style setups because this makes a great tighter angle. Push it in at 50 millimeters and have it set at f2.8. You get a nice blurry background, but also a nice tight shot of whoever is talking. And because it's a fixed f2.8, you do get really good low light performance out of this lens. And if you're close to something, then you can get a really nice blurry background. And that actually is something this lens does really well. It has a really close focus distance, which means you can get really tight product shots, great details of products or great details of things that you might be exploring the world around you, and you notice something that has a really intricate detail, then this is a great lens because you can get really close focus distance with it, not have to trade out with any other lenses. So yes, it's a little tight to do handheld vlogging style stuff, selfie style stuff with, but you can do it. It's a little on the tight side, so I'd recommend maybe setting it off on a tripod and walking a little further away. But overall, this lens is a great lens. Although this lens is built really well and has been incredibly durable for the last 3 years, it's small and lightweight, which makes it ideal for travelers and great for gimbal work. You can put this lens on a gimbal, and if you balance it at about 50 millimeters, which is about halfway, then you can zoom out and zoom back in and not throw off your gimbal's balance enough to where you have to rebalance the gimbal. And that is really handy if you're doing a lot of running gun shooting with the gimbal setup. The images that come out of this all the way from 28 through 75 are really sharp, really crisp, and just have a really good quality. For those reasons, this lens was the lens that was on my camera 99% of the time until the 17-28 was released. When Tamron released the 17-28, I went down to my local camera shop and picked one up immediately because this was the lens I'd been waiting for to be able to do all the stuff where I film myself. And also when I do real estate stuff for clients or when I want to show off a space in a corporate office or something like that, this is a great lens for that. It has very little distortion, very low barrel distortion, so you don't get bowed lines when you're walking down a hallway or going through a doorway. Very, very little distortion. The images this produces are excellent edge to edge, even wide open and zoomed all the way out. I did a whole video about doing astrophotography with this lens, and you can click or tap right here to see that. But being that this is an f2.8 all the way through the zoom range, you get great low light performance. And I didn't find that I missed the extra millimeter going out to 16 that much. And I really didn't find that I missed 35 millimeters on the telephoto end either, because if you really need a little extra reach when you're doing film work, you can always use Sony's APS-C or clear image zoom to punch in and get a little extra reach out of these lenses. The other reason I was really excited about this lens is because it's small, lightweight, and it's an internal zoom, which means the front elements don't move in and out. You can balance this on a gimbal, and it's really easy to balance on a gimbal because it's just not a very big lens. It's not very heavy. And you can still operate the lens throughout the zoom range and not throw off the balance of your gimbal. So that is a really big upside for this little lens here. And like the 28-75, it has a very close focusing distance. So you can get right up next to an object, get a really sharp picture, and really blur out the background. That's one thing with wide angle lenses. It's a little harder to get that blurry background, but with this, because you can get so close to stuff, you can still really blur out the background, which is great if you're wanting to highlight specific products or specific things on a product. But this lens has now been on my camera since it came out, probably 90% of the time, especially when I'm filming YouTube videos and things like that. This is an excellent lens for things that I do like that, because it's also small and lightweight. So if you're somebody who films yourself, or you're somebody who likes to show off spaces, especially for like real estate or things like that, this is an excellent lens to start with. And then early last year, Tamron released the 70-180, their 70-200 equivalent. And I gotta say, after using it for a year or almost a year, this is an excellent lens if you want or need a telephoto lens with great low light performance, really sharp images, fantastic autofocus, but you don't want to spend $2,500 or $2,400 or $1,400, $1,500 for a lens. This lens retails for about $1,300, but it is an incredibly well-performing lens for that price. Not only has it got the same construction, really well weather-sealed lens, but it has fantastic optics that give you really good image quality across the entire zoom range, and the autofocus is incredibly fast and accurate when it's working with Sony's autofocus system. I really like using this when I'm shooting events and you have a camera toward the back, but you want to be able to get close up and kind of punch in to catch a speaker on a stage. This works really well. Or weddings, this works really well because it gives you a nice zoom range to be able to get into and get tight shots of things without having to get into or in the way of those events or those people. And so this is an excellent lens for events and conferences if you're the type of videographer or photographer who films or takes photos at those types of events. It also works well for landscapes. A lot of people don't think about a telephoto lens for landscapes, but sometimes you want to be able to really punch in and just isolate something. This lens does a great job at that. It has this nice little lock button so you can lock it. It won't slip out and extend when you're traveling with it. This has been in my bag pretty much every day, every trip, just in case I need that little bit of extra punch. And one thing that's really cool about this lens is it has this weird sort of macro mode. You take it out of autofocus, you put it in manual focus, and you can actually focus this really, really close to small objects, which is great if you want to highlight really small objects, but get really close in detailed shots. Now, the caveat is it's only good for using it in the very center of the lens. The rest is really out of focus, bokeh kind of effect, but the very center looks really cool and you get this really nice, very shallow depth of field using it. Now you might think that I'm just a Tamron fanboy, and I kind of am, because I think that the price for value and performance that you get from Tamron lenses is really incredibly high. So if you're somebody who's a little bit more budget conscious, but you want really high performing glass, then the Tamron lenses are some of the best on the market right now for the Sony system. But I do own other lenses by Sony and others, and the Sony 85 1.8 is one of my favorites because it is what I think to be one of the perfect focal lengths for portrait work, for headshots when I go do corporate headshots. And it works really well for doing product shots because you can get an incredibly tight shot. Also, because it's an f1.8, you can really get a nice bokeh. But this lens in particular, I think, is one of Sony's most underrated lenses. It's not a G, it's not a G Master, it's just a regular 1.8, but the image quality that comes out of this for $550 is incredible. It's really sharp, it's no distortion, and the bokeh quality is really nice. And if you get these little extension tubes, which are super cheap on Amazon, you can turn this into a really nice functioning macro lens, which gives you great detail shots on products and things of that nature. So I don't know how Sony got the performance on this lens to be so close to some way more expensive lenses, but if you're looking for a good portrait lens, this is the one I would start with because of its performance for price. If you don't have enough space to back up far enough to use the 85mm focal length, then look at Sony's 55mm 1.8. It's the Sony Zeiss 55. It's incredibly sharp, good autofocus, and it's one of the other best value to performance ratio lenses that I consider out there. I don't use that all the time. I don't have it. I do rent one from time to time, and it's fantastic every time I use it. And next is the only G Master lens I own. But first, I'm filming with it, so I've got to switch it out. This is the Sony 24mm G Master 1.4 lens, and it is an incredible lens. It's one of the more expensive lenses I own at $1,300, and I purchased it almost purely because I wanted to be able to go film myself at night and use it for astrophotography and capturing the aurora. One of my goals this year, and maybe by the time you're seeing this video, is to film the aurora. This lens will do that because it has such a great low light performance with an aperture of f1.4. But the other thing that makes this lens really incredible for astrophotography is there's no distortion edge to edge, wide open. It's super sharp all the way through. And because it's so sharp edge to edge, it doesn't smear the stars out in the corner or anything like that. This lens is just simply incredible. I think it's probably the best lens you can buy right now if you want to do astrophotography. Because it's wide, you can get a nice wide shot, but it has such great performance and such little distortion. It just absolutely does an incredible job. The other reason I got this was to film myself at night. So one of the things I did after I got it was be able to go out to a glacier with my A7s III and this lens and film the entire video using nothing but moonlight and firelight while we were out walking out to this glacier. And it did incredibly well. Now, yes, the ISO is high and there's noise. I didn't clean it up at all because I wanted people to see the low light performance of the A7s III at really high ISO. But the fact that this lens could lock autofocus on me using nothing but the moon or nothing but firelight, and at other times I've filmed myself using nothing but the light off the A7s III screen and like a quarter moon, and this lens has no problem operating at that because it has such great performance at such a wide open aperture. A few other things that I do really like about this lens is it has a declicked or a clicked option for the aperture ring, and I like the fact it has a manual aperture ring because you can kind of set it and forget it. Whereas I've noticed sometimes I've bumped my aperture settings accidentally being on the dial on my cameras, but this, it overrides anything in the camera. So if you have it set at 1.4, no matter what you do on the camera, it's always going to stay at 1.4. And like other Sony lenses, it has a switch for autofocus, manual focus, and a focus hold button, or whatever you want to program that button to be. I don't really use that much, but this lens is incredible at everything, shooting everything I've thrown at it. It also works really well on a gimbal because it's small and it's lightweight and compact. If you're wanting to get a wider focal length that does incredible at low light, this is the lens you're going to want to get. Save up for it, wait for it, because it is worth it. This would be an incredible lens for shooting weddings. This would be an incredible lens for shooting interiors. It's not quite wide enough to do real estate. I think you need to be more in the 14, 15, 16, maybe 17 millimeters for real estate because you want to make small spaces look really big. And so for that, you might consider the Sony G20mm 1.8, but it's just an absolutely phenomenal lens. I've used other lenses, some honorable mentions of the Laowa 15mm 0D. It's a fantastic real estate lens because you can really show small spaces off and make them look big, which is what you want. And because it's an f2, it has a really great low light performance as well. A couple of other honorable mentions that I have used personally, but I don't own them because they would either duplicate one of my other lenses or I just didn't need something like that. One was the Tamron 28-200, which is a fantastic lens if you want an all-in-one lens. I did a review on it and you can find that here. It has really great performance all the way through the zoom range. It starts in f2.8, which gives you good low light performance on the wide end, but then you have a lot of reach at 200 millimeters. And if you use APS-C mode because you're filming and you still want to film in 4K, you can punch way in at 300 millimeters, which gives you a lot of ability and a lot of versatility in a single lens that you don't have to take off your camera body. Another great offering from Tamron is the 70-300, which it's not as great at low light because you're starting at f3.5, but it is a very good lens, and because Sony generally handles low light really well, it's an excellent lens. And that's a lens I would highly recommend because it's only $500. If you want to get into wildlife photography, or you think you want to get into wildlife photography, but you don't want to invest a lot of money in a lens right away, start with that lens at $500. It's really good, has really great performance, and will give you an idea of the focal lengths you need to really get into wildlife photography, or if you need extra zoom reach. If you do a lot of events that are in bigger rooms that you need to really punch in, that would be a good one to start with, where you're not investing a lot of money into a single lens that you're not sure exactly if you need it that much or not. Also, I've used a lot of APS-C lenses, so let me know if you'd be interested in a video about APS-C lenses similar to this, because there's a few really good ones out there. But at the beginning of the video, I promised I would tell you some combinations that I would recommend if you only had the budget for one lens, or if you had the budget for two lenses, what should you get? And to start off with, I would say if you only have the budget for one lens and you just want one lens that will kind of do everything, you can't really go wrong with the Tamron 28-200. That gives you an incredibly versatile range. And then if you find that you need a little bit more width or wide end, then you can always add the 17-28. And that would bring me to my second combination, that if you only want to buy two lenses, if you only have about $1,400 to spend, then that's what I would do. I would get the 17-28 and the 28-200, because between those two lenses, you have pretty much everything completely covered for almost anything you could want to shoot. That's what I would have done if I hadn't just purchased the 70-180 and then already had the 28-75, because the 28-200 really has great performance all the way through it, and I really enjoyed shooting it with it while I had it. Now, if you want the best performing glass in the widest variety of situations, like in low light situations, if you shoot a lot of weddings or other things like that where the venues are dark, or if you want to do other things in low light performance, but you want the entire versatility of all of the zoom ranges, then these are the three lenses you would get. A little under $3,000, you can get all three of these. They all perform really well because they're all fixed f2.8 all the way through the zoom range. I don't believe in spending more money than you have to, but I do think you should get really high performing glass, because a lens is something you're going to invest in and use for a very long time, ideally. Even though you might trade camera bodies more frequently, a lens you're probably going to carry with you through several different camera bodies. There are a lot of accessories that I use that are great for Sony cameras. You can click or tap right here. I put together a playlist. I'll see you in one of those videos. As always, if you have questions, ask me in the comments below. I respond to every question eventually. Or you can join my live stream Wednesday nights at 4 p.m. Alaska time, 8 p.m. Eastern, and you can ask me the questions live and hear the answers live. I'll see you again soon in the next video. Cheers.